Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jens Heitland Show, where I interview experts from different fields to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. Today's episode is another Innovation Breakfast Club episode, where I meet with previous guests to dig deeper into one specific topic. Today's topic is all about people. Please welcome back to the show Ulrike, Werner, Mercedes, Dennis, Debora, and Joshua. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Innovation Breakfast Club. Today's a slightly different setup. So we're a couple of people more. We are 2, 4, 6, and including me, 7 people on the Breakfast Club. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you.
Thank you.
So before we go into our value discussion and talking about the topics, it's all about people as the topic for our today's conversation. So I'm very much fond of innovation culture, of course, because I'm all about innovation topics, and I'm doubling down on innovation culture as a topic for helping others to build innovation culture in organizations. So it's helping businesses to build innovation culture, but as well helping consultants and helping coaches to bring that offer to other clients on their side. So that's why it's super interesting to understand how people are part of innovation and how do people work with innovation or not work. So I would like to explore together with all of you today is what is the importance, or is it important, is it not important, the role of people in an organization and the role of people in cultures and in innovation. Let's start with an opening round and starting off with Ulrike. What's your view? Hi.
So, of course, I would say it's all about people. So a clear yes. I think people are at the center and should be at the center of everything we do. What I see today is that people get very excited about technology, especially when innovating things and what technology can do. But I'm a strong believer that we should be equally excited about people and putting people in the center. It's about what can technology do for us? How can it serve us? And of course, if you want to succeed, you need to understand that people are in the center of everything you do.
Great opening statement. Thank you for that. Let's move on with Joshua.
Jens, thanks for bringing us all together. And I guess I'm looking forward to asking you some questions a bit later about why you started the Innovation Breakfast, seeing that we're talking about people today and everyone that's on the call. But, maybe just to outline sort of where I started my own thinking about this conversation and this topic. And I started with a book from Susan Cain, where she talks about the power of introverts. And the reason I sort of started there was because I sort of started thinking about how do you define people? And obviously there are 2 broad definitions that she uses. She uses introverts and extroverts. And I think why I started there is because of this change that the world has gone through in the last 15 months, and thinking about how extroverts have sort of struggled through this time, maybe where they haven't had physical interaction with people, and how introverts maybe have thrived during this time. And to maybe build off something that Ulrike touched on is, yes, I'm also a strong believer that people are really at the heart and the center of everything that we do. But I think that through using technology, we can accentuate and build on that. And I think inside of this digital age, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Mercedes has to say today based on her experience in the digital realm, in terms of how we can use technology and human brains to create better services and better companies to allow innovation culture to really start thriving at a completely different level to some of the things that we've had before. So Jens, thanks for bringing us all together. And yeah, looking forward to learning from everyone on today's call.
It's a pleasure. Let's move on to Debora.
So I highly agree with Ulrike. I also think that, it's at least a lot is about people. And I also think it should be. I think that I would disagree with Joshua slightly that introverts have thrived in this pandemic, because I think, there's a lot of people that, are really noticing the lack of physical engagements with their friends, and, I think this has really shown us that, you know, a purely virtual world does not really work, and that, you know, we do need to recreate a space to re-engage physically with each other.
First disagreement. That's great. We will discuss that later. Let's move on to Dennis. Thank you, Debora.
So it's my turn, and I'm formulating a very large disagreement. Let me start off by saying that I think people are at the center of everything, but should they be? In that sense, in everything that we do, people are at the center of what we do to work with other people. But it's the difference between working with somebody and satisfying their personal needs, or focusing on a user-centric approach. But we're forgetting that all these people together, they form a large group of people that is having a very large effect or impact on the rest of the world, which is not only people, which is a whole ecosystem of other things. In that sense, I'm thinking that for the purpose of this conversation, I'll be on the side of not people, but of the, I would say, everything else. Because we seem to be doing everything for us, for me first, and then for us, but not for everything around us. So I think that's a core problem to everything that we experience today.
Thank you, Dennis. Let's move on to Mercedes.
Good morning. Thank you for having us on the show again, Jens. Well, I will get the glove, as we say in Spain, from Dennis. And I do agree. I don't think it should be all about people, but I do think people need to start to think from a perspective of what about the ecosystem where we exist? What about to apply a culture of people with the truly values and behavior to try to do something good, not only for people, but as well for the planet, for the ecosystem, and use, as Joshua was saying, all the means, tool, technology available for us to do every day a little bit better than the day before, to create something better, to grow, to make some impact around us, and not only about people. At the end of the day, it's the people who has the power to do something about problems, and I think they should be putting the focus doing that, and not just putting the focus on people-centric. It's not always about our needs, it's about the ecosystem and thrive in the ecosystem where we exist.
Great one. Thank you, Mercedes. And last but not least, Werner in the intro round.
Listen, can I be on the fence a little bit?
Of course.
Because the first thing is, when we got this kind of introduction to the topic, is like, how can you reframe it? Like, what if it's not? So the first thing that popped into my mind, because my job is all about just focusing on people. So I'm kind of like an Ulrike court, because that's my work all the time. But then I started thinking about this, and I've been thinking about it a long time, is that if you keep in mind that Donald Trump is also people, right? So that is something to consider, and wherever you stand on the fence on that one. But then the other thing that I think is also important, if you go across more to people, and this is the other thing that is kind of a concern for me, and something that I see happening in my own host country, is that when you think about people, what is actually popping in your mind? Especially when you're in an organization, because sometimes when I walk into a boardroom, it's a bunch of old white guys sitting around the table. Is it people with diverse backgrounds? Is it gender? That kind of stuff. So I kind of say yes, but I am a little bit worried. So that's my stance.
Awesome. Let's get into a discussion. Joshua, what are your thoughts? What do you want to provoke?
So I want to provoke, and I want to just tie two things together quickly. And it's interesting sort of where Werner took the discussion, and you raised the point around diversity. And it sort of links into something that both Dennis and Mercedes touched on already in terms of the ecosystem. And in sort of preparing for the conversation today, I went back to a book called Let My People Go Surfing. And that's written by the founder of Patagonia. And so just to quote a line from him, and it's sort of right towards the end of the book, and he says, diversity evolves out of a commitment to consistent change. And if you think about that from an overall perspective, how we've just touched on ecosystems and diversity, and if you think about how diversity can strengthen an ecosystem, And then you think about how can you strengthen the ecosystem through unlocking and enabling people inside of that, which Jens, I'll come to you later, but I'm sure that talks to some of the innovation culture things that you want to tease out today.
Thanks for that. And for the others who haven't been on the previous breakfast calls with the men's group, Joshua is always shooting knowledge bombs. So no, it's a normal process. There will be more quotes and things coming, but let's go to Debora.
Yes, so I wanted to talk to Mercedes and Dennis a little about their points of, not being that, perhaps not everything should be about people, and that we do have to consider our ecosystem. And a thought that I have on that is, if we, don't we ultimately do both? Because, if we, I think these are not completely detachable from each other. Even if I say now, as an organization, I want to focus on the environment, and I want to be, I don't know, climate neutral or even climate positive. Some organizations are doing that too. Doesn't that ultimately also tie back into focusing on people to, create a healthier environment, create, I don't know, solution? And I think that these are not necessarily detached from each other. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's move to Ulrike.
So I wanted to react on exactly the same thing as well. Because sometimes if we talk about ecosystem, communities, and impacts, in the end, I do believe it's done through people. Because otherwise it's just corporate ambitions. It's just corporate blah, blah. Someone should rescue the planet. But in the end, it's us individuals and our personal lifestyle that, for example, destroys the planet. So in the end, you need to make it personal in order to achieve impact and to see action. And that is something why I say I believe in the end, the common denominator is people, as this is the key then to move forward and see things happening. So I would say, of course, it's an interaction, but in the end, we should not forget that it is the individuals that need to get going.
Dennis is itching. I see that.
Wait. Okay, I was on all the time. I'm sorry. So don't misunderstand the reason why I dragged the whole ecosystem thinking into this. It's difficult for me to not think as this as a people problem, but I think that's exactly the problem. The problem is that we tend to always think that we have the power, and there's nothing else that can solve this, and that's because we are the problem. And in that sense, if we want to tackle things, we need to, of course, start with ourselves, and we need to make the path towards understanding how your personal contribution has a huge effect or impact on what we do as people. And trying to align that, I would say that's the business that we're all in, trying to at least surf on the wave, like you already said, Joshua, of persistent change, and being able to add some value to a process where everybody is trying to make the world a better place. But if you say it's all about people, then you're stuck in a space, or at least as how I look at it, that is only about people. And that keeps you, I would say, only there. And this is great because I get, when I get assignments that are mostly about people, I enjoy working only mostly with people. But I do have a growing concern that it only becomes about the people. And in that sense, if you just broaden your perspective a little bit more, you will see that there's a whole world that you can use and draw power upon, and that is not only about people. And I would say that's the So I think we are aligned, but it's just in a different perspective.
Okay, let's move to Mercedes.
I would like to add to what Dennis says. I'm trying to answer Debora and Ulrike. I do believe that people have a huge responsibility to act, and a huge responsibility as a species with intelligence to do something about the means we have around us to make things better, but not to make things better just for humans. That's again an egoistic point of view. And see, we are here to make our life as good as possible. What about everything else that we are destroying? What about the life of animals? Are they not important because they have a smaller brain than we have? And I believe it's our responsibility to use that intelligence in a way that we can find balance back in a lot of things that we have been destroying, and as well to help the planet to survive whatever kind of future waves we come, not only for us, but as well for ecosystems, animals, and the planet. I think that's our responsibility. So of course, it's the people the ones that have the bigger responsibility to do something about the future for everybody, but it should not be with the only mean that people lives a very good life. What about the rest? Yeah. That was the intention with it. It's not only about people.
So now we have set the scene. We are still on 20,000 foot level. I would love to drag us a little bit closer and get us into the innovation space. So let's think about corporations, companies from small to big. It's not really important how big they are. It's more about how do and are people key point in innovating in companies or innovation in companies? What are your thoughts? Anyone who wants to start? Joshua wants to.
You polite in putting me on the spot, Jens, but Ulrike had a hand up before me, so I'm happy to go first though. But I sort of want to just expose something a little different before answering your question, and ask the question to everyone on the call today is, yes, we've been talking about people, but what if we pivoted and talk around access? And what I mean by that is, if you think about Neuralink, so the work that Elon Musk is doing in terms of giving a human brain, and Dennis, this links to the point that you mentioned before we started recording, is around access that you can have off an additional human brain. And what I mean by that is, how can a person have additional access to just their physical brain capacity? Because inside of the information age that we live in, a person with a chip in their brain, for example, might be able to offer completely different thoughts and a different level of thinking to contribute to that innovation space that you talked about, Jens. But to answer your question, Jens, about the importance of people inside creating an innovation culture inside of that, and I'm going to go back to Jim Collins, and specifically where he talks about Good to Great, where he talks about level 5 leadership. And inside level 5 leadership, he talks about the way that level 5 leaders lead an organization. And just in summary quickly, where he says a level 5 leader is not someone who acknowledges the success by themselves. So if the company is successful, they acknowledge the contribution of others. However, if they make a mistake and the company is not successful, they then take that upon themselves and they ask very hard questions about how they were not leading adequately. And I think that that's a big differentiator that people need to realize inside creating innovation spaces and innovation cultures, is that we need to think about, one, sort of the space that you as a person interact and how you interact with the broader ecosystem. And then two, to also recognize when you are wrong as an individual, but attribute your success far more broadly to that interconnected space and interplay between the different elements of the ecosystem.
Great one. Ulrike.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Joshua just said, there is a lot in it. So one part, as you said, what about imagine we would have a chip in our brain? I do believe as we are on the edge now and we see that technology, computing becomes ever more intelligent. Think about the artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. So of course, humans might be afraid, oh my God, is this running out of our hands? And I do believe that at the same time, the human intelligence, the social intelligence becomes equally important. So there might be things where computers might be able, or machines, to do the job much better than we are. Think about mathematics and calculating things. But at the same time, as we are a human species, we want to belong somewhere. We are dependent on those human aspects, like caring for each other, being heard, being listened to, etc. So I do believe we need to foster with the same energy our human capabilities to balance the great developments in technology. The second part Joshua was talking about, I'm also a big fan of, is about how do we lead people and what motivates and what also frustrates us. And often we see that companies do not really utilize their whole human capital because we have sometimes really weak people leaders. We do not see people, we do not hear people, and by that we do not engage and bringing all of us to the table. Or think about what Werner just mentioned before, not using the full diversity, always talking to the same audience with the same people. So of course, there's a big nugget in it as well. And I think when it comes to innovation, your question before, Jens, was that I do believe this user-centric is something we often say, but what I see in the reality, in the business context, is that we still get too excited about a technical feature instead of what a thing could truly do to people. So what is the end result, what we want to see and improve? So those are the three aspects I do see.
So from a business context, I'm a strong believer in community and doing things together. What are your perspectives of community drive and people doing things together than doing isolated things? And of course, bridging that a little bit to innovation as well. Werner, what are your thoughts? You're on mute, by the way.
I do that cup for myself, right? So yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you raise. I don't know if I'm going to directly answer it, but I think it's a bit of both, because when I go into kind of design projects, like a lot of times what we do is we try and force people to collaborate, right? They work in groups, they have to be together in a room together. But the thing is, what I found is also that doesn't really leave a lot of space for reflection. So I think it's a combination of both, where you have to actually kind of create a space where people can reflect and be with their own thoughts and think about things for a change, but then also then bringing all those thoughts together so they start mixing. Because just to like tap into, and I don't want to like hammer this point across all the time, but this whole idea of diversity in a way, I mean, you can interpret it a different way, but then also bringing these diverse thoughts together. Because I think one of the challenges that we face currently here in my little home country is the fact that we are a bit shy of diversity at the moment, and that's actually hampering our economy and also the amount of innovation that happens, because we're not bringing enough people with different backgrounds around the table, right? And then also giving them a time to like speak for themselves, not just get drowned out by other people's voices. So I think it's a combination. A short answer.
Yeah. Mercedes, what are your thoughts?
Well, one of the principles of innovation comes in the intersection of different minds. So there is not intersection if there is no collaboration. So that's a given. It's very difficult to innovate in the same little club where everybody even don't have diversity of thoughts. So for me, that's a given. But the other part that is very, very interesting, thinking about how to create something that is inclusive, how to open up to the collaboration and the different thoughts, requires for the people participating a couple of basic, you can say, values and behaviors. One of them, don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid that someone has a bigger and better idea than yours. Because in the moment we are open and we let down the guardian, then things start to happen. So don't be judgmental against yourself if someone is better than you, and don't be very quickly to judge anybody else's opinions because just in your head it doesn't sound right. Be curious. Why did you say so? Why did you come from that aspect? And when we open up, then the truly collaboration can start to flourish and we can spin off on each other's ideas.
Love that. Dennis is next.
So I like one word that pops out, which is I would say as being stretched in this whole situation, which is intelligence. And a little while back, I made a note now of what you said, Mercedes. We need to use our intelligence to bring back and keep the balance. And I think that's a huge, when you talk about responsibility, there lies a huge challenge for us to say, well, if we learn how to work together, if we learn how to raise our human capital, our ability to collaborate and to intersect and do all the things that we need to be able to do to grow and move forward, can we also find it in ourselves to trust the thing that we build and say, well, if we build something that mimics our own intelligence, do we dare to trust it and maybe even collaborate with it in the future? And is that extending our humanity, or is it something entirely new? And then we get to the maybe a little bit too far from the whole innovation idea. But I think I have, I would say, a secret. How do you call this? A naughty desire, or what is it? A guilty pleasure. A guilty pleasure in the sense that I really want artificial intelligence and technology to be able to help us, and that we can trust it, and that it doesn't go into a direction that we need to think out of doom scenarios, that we as humans might be taken over by a different form of ourselves in a digital form. That's way too far. Even if they're saying singularity is in 2045, I think, something like that. I'm very, very anxious to see where that can really lead us. And if we tie that back to your question, Jens, about how people are key points in innovating towards, I don't know if that is the innovation space that you're talking about, but any innovation space needs, in that sense, people to start up towards a goal that you want to reach. And if I say I have a really guilty pleasure to walk towards something that maybe other people are totally frightened of, then we're already misaligned. And then we won't go to that space. We'll just have big discussions on how that how we get two groups of people that think in a different way. People who trust and people who don't trust. And maybe the people who trust, they're going to be duped at the end and be assimilated by the Bohr collective. I don't know. But it is a very interesting point to see how far intelligence of our own, our emotional intelligence that needs to grow. What if emotional intelligence can totally be duplicated and not even duplicated? That it's a new emotional intelligence that comes into play, and that it can help you to facilitate a perfect, constant, persistent change towards the future. Sounds like Star Trek.
Great one. Let's move on with Joshua.
So Dennis, just love sort of how you tied that all together right at the end under emotional intelligence. And one of the things that I'm going to throw a bone in here for all of us to think about, because I think there's been a lot of agreeing in this discussion so far. And I don't think there's been enough disagreement in terms of some of the questions that we've raised. So Jens, what you mentioned about community. So I want us to think about the ingredients that create a successful community. And how do we go about doing that? Because I think we've focused very much, and it's been interesting to sort of see how the conversations ebbed and flowed, but it's been very people-centric, and it's been around intelligence, it's been around emotion, it's been about creating that environment in ourselves around doing that. But if we start thinking about a broader community, what are the different touch points inside that ecosystem, inside that environment that need to be enabled to drive an innovation culture forward? So Jens, I'm going to start off by asking you this in terms of thinking about your experience with working with innovation and with culture and with people. What are some of the other elements that need to be created and built out to start enabling people to do their best work?
That's a good question, Josh, and thank you for the plug. Yeah, so for me, it's really, as I said, for me, it's all about people and understanding people in a way deeper sense than we often do. Because if you work in a business environment, it's often just, hey, it's surface level that we engage with each other. But I truly believe if you run an organization, if you run a business, you really truly need to understand the needs, dreams, and desires of your employees, and that's the starting point. So it's really going as deep as possible into that as a leader of an organization or the owner or whatever, And then really looking into, I always work with the concept with the visible and the invisible. It's like the invisible is the needs, dreams, and desires and the feelings they have. And then they're expressed in emotions. So if you have, as an example, you have an unmet need, you feel grumpy. And because you feel grumpy, you behave in a certain way. And that's all trigger points for a leader to understand, oh, there's something off. And to be able to see that, and everyone knows that from a personal perspective, if you have a partner, if you have a child at home, you know when something is off because you feel it. And I think that's the perspective as a leader. And when you work with innovation, it's the same as a totality when you work in an organization, when you work with people in any sense, you need to be tuning in, being empathetic, whatever that word is, you get it. And it's really going to that level and then starting from that. I think what I see over and over and over again, it's all about business. How can we create as fast as possible money, and today, not tomorrow? And for me, a true innovation culture and the community drive is, how can we build a strong community that's built on each other's values, and then fulfilling the needs, dreams, and desires of the employees as the first point, and then using that power which will be generated because they feel engaged, they feel empowered, to transform the organization to be long-term successful. Long answer, but let's move on with Ulrike.
I would like to bring together things that we have heard before when Mercedes, for example, talked about the responsibilities we do have as individuals as well. So on one hand side, we have our needs, dreams, desires, but we also carry as individuals responsibilities, as we also do for our companies and for our communities. So I was thinking about a ring, and in this circle in the middle is the me. And then you have a ring around it, which is the we. And then you have another ring around it, which is the bigger we. So this is how we very simply in the past tried to make us as leaders and our employees understand the impact we have. So something, it's about me, myself, it's about the company, the ecosystem we work in, and then it's our joint impact on the community, the bigger we. And I do believe we should, and this is why I meant it's all about us and get going, because sometimes we human tend to giving the responsibility to someone else. Let's say we say, I'm so dissatisfied, it's my boss or the company that do not do la la la. Or sometimes we think, oh my God, there is technology invented in the car industry. So the car industry will take care of climate change. I should just wait, and when they come up with hybrid and whatever, things will be fine. Meaning the responsibility is taken away from me. So I can hide behind the company or behind the bigger we. And therefore, I think it's so important to always think those three dimensions and create win-win-win situations. So a win for myself, a win for the, let's say, company I'm working in, and a win for the community. So going forward, when we make business plans, inventions, whatever, we should always see that all three dimensions take a win from it. So not only jealous me, myself, and I don't care what the rest is doing, or in the worst case, just hoping that someone else will solve the shit.
Great one. Mercedes.
Well, one of the things I'm always very, enthusiastic about is the sense of belonging. And when you are working for a community or feel that you belong to a community, there is already an attachment, there is already a motivation and a force that wants you to do something for the community. So I think good communities and communities that are strong are capable to create that sense of belonging that could be around that they are sharing a common, you can say, interests, or they are sharing a common need, or they are located in the same place, wherever it could be the reason for calling a group of individuals at a community. When you have a sense of belonging, when you feel that you are needed, one of our most, deeper values to do something for others and someone needs you triggers a lot of very good action. So I believe, I'm a strong believer of the power of the communities. To create a good community, you need to be set in the community, you need to get a role, and you need to feel fulfilling that role, and you need to feel needed. It happens in companies, it happens in society, and it's a very good power to do together things for the community. And then that grow together is a very good motor for innovation, for well-being, for development, and for fulfill one of our most basic needs, to belong.
Yeah, and it's quite fascinating. It's also when you look into the research, which is like, I don't know if you've heard about the blue zones, where people are getting very, very senior and very old. That's also one of the key parts. Is not just food and health and so on. It's also the mental health, which is based on community sense and having throughout their whole life a community around them supporting each other. Let's move on to Joshua.
So Mercedes, I love sort of how you brought it all together there around belonging, and it sort of ties in very well to a Twitter thread that I picked up last night from Rich Roll, and I know that some of them may have seen it, and Jens is smiling, so he probably did see it as well. But it talks about mastery, and what he says inside of that is he says, because the purpose, beauty, and satisfaction you desperately seek lies not in the accomplishment, but in rather the experience of striving, but rather in the experience of striving towards it with everything you've got. And I think that if you think about what that means from an overall community perspective, it's talking more about not just who you are inside of that community, but the experience that is created when you are partaking inside of that community and the belonging that you have and what that enables you to do. And I know that Dennis he's got a phenomenal visual mind. And we've also got an expert in experience design and UX with Werner on the call. So I'm interested to see what threads they pick up on, having heard that.
Straight away, let's move to Dennis. But you need to unmute yourself.
So the great thing about what you just did, Joshua, is that I felt it, but I cannot repeat it. But I did have a spark to somebody that has given me I would say, a sense of purpose, or a sentence that I follow, I would say, meticulously in my life. And that is Lemmy from Motorhead, who created a song called "The Chase is Better Than the Catch." And that's, I would say, in a community, like you also said, Mercedes, that motivation and driving force that you share, that's what people get around together for, that drives a community forward. And once you reach that goal, what then? there should always be something that, and I would say that's something that you also mentioned in your great quotes, Joshua, is the fact that you have this persistent change. It's always changing. It will never stop changing. But in order to do that, you need to make people flexible in the way that they learn how to deal with change and collaborate in how to move forward on that. But I just wanted to mention that there are artists that are able to reduce very complex ideas into catchphrases that should be put in T-shirts, which is why I like Motorhead.
Thanks, Dennis. Ulrike.
Yeah, I'm thinking on the opposite. We also see more and more people isolating themselves and being very selfish. So of course we should utilize all of us and being more engaged and giving back. But at the same time, we see many people don't do that at all, being even more self-centered. So I'm asking myself, what should we do to wake up people and to make us all going, giving more and taking more part in the communities around us? What do you think?
That's a great one. Let's straight away move to Joshua.
So I think Jens, Werner has been patiently waiting. No, he's pointing to me now, so it means that his hand on his Zoom screen is not up correctly, but he's going to follow, maybe try to pick up on some threads that I put down, and we'll do a South African tag team and see how we can string it all together. So Ulrike, it's quite fascinating how you brought that topic up, and it is something that I was also thinking as Dennis was talking about, and it links back to what I mentioned right at the start of today's call and conversation around introverts and extroverts. And so Susan Cain, inside of the book, she says that there's zero correlation between being the best talker and having the best ideas. And I think that's something that we all need to think about in the way that we go about interacting with people. Because, we can all go into a boardroom, and we've all worked in situations where there've been a number of maybe highly extroverted people who own the room per se. And I think one of the things that we need to be more conscious of is how do we increase and bring in the quieter people into the discussions and bring them into the room. And that links back to, Mercedes, what you mentioned earlier around the intersection of minds in terms of unlocking innovation. And I think that how we can start about doing that is what Jens and I refer to as cross-cultural or cross-generational learning. So how do we go about creating that from an environmental perspective? And I think inside an organization, which is a big part of driving innovation culture, is how do you get and intersect younger generations with older generations? And I think that that sort of links a lot of the time where I spend my thinking is around reverse mentorship. And I think, this answer that I've given has been a bit jumbled, and I'll just try and distill it quickly in terms of the points that I'm trying to bring across. But one I'm saying is generations need to be more open to interaction cross-generationally. I think that we also need to consciously go and access different and more diverse points of view. What I mean by that is not just staying with your crowd. So actively go and pursue getting different ideas and bringing that back into an organization. And then lastly, I think that organizations actively need to encourage people who are maybe quieter inside meetings to actively have their space. And that doesn't mean that they need to have a space to talk inside of a meeting, but they can be engaged with outside of that space that you're creating for.
Werner.
Thanks. Yeah. No, I wanted you to go first because the flow was there, and I might be slowing it down a little bit. I just want to tip my hat to Mercedes because she really she gave me a bit of an aha moment a couple of minutes ago, because one of the things that we focus on a lot in the work that I do is the experience economy. Joe Pine and that introduced the experience economy, and we spoke about, and it's something that I kind of avoid when I go work with clients, to really tap into the transformational economy, because that's the next level up, because that's really about coaching and bringing people. And ultimately also the thing that I really believe, and this is my old age, is that I feel like at the essence, and Ulrike, to connect with what some of the stuff that you've said, is that ultimately you can only change yourself. So if I'm annoyed with Poland, I can think about things and I can do things, but ultimately I need to change my attitude, go out and then take action, right? So I need to change myself to make the change. But I found it really interesting what Mercedes mentioned about community, because community is an influencer. So for example, my son recently, like, he's a huge rebel. He doesn't want to brush his teeth. He doesn't want to do anything that I tell him to do, right? But then I observed that when he goes to a football practice, he falls in with the team, because the community is doing things. And he's going, ooh, what is really cool about the community is we can all play and have fun. So then he transforms himself and he's not a rebel anymore. So it's like kind of that connection. So Mercedes, thank you very much. But I think also what's maybe important to consider is that the other responsibility then comes back to me to also be very careful about the communities that I select. So what community do I select that influences my thinking? But then also when I think about an organization, what organization am I selecting to go into to become my community? Because I might not be able to change the big organizational community, but I'm selecting that community. So it's a little bit of my responsibility there. So thank you very much.
I mean, I would even add to that point, which is also when you have a company selecting your clients, it's the same way, for me at least. Let's go over straight away to Mercedes.
Thank you, Werner. Very, very good comment. It's a very good question that where do you choose to belong? Where do you choose to influence? Or where do you choose to have an impact? And then they let you to have an impact on you. Very, 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 brave way of thinking. Now, I just forgot why I have my hand raised. I got into the conversation with Werner. I let the flow go.
Okay, that's fine. Let's move on with Debora.
Yeah, so I just wanted to tie back real quickly to what Ulrike said about you know, people being selfish, and on the other hand, communities, and how we can kind of try to move the needle a little from selfish thinking to a little more community thinking, or just not as self-centered. And you know, I got thinking about where it stems from, that people do that. And you know, I think that there's a lot of different answers you can give to that question, but I think it's a really important point if we want to look at how we can move that needle a bit. And so things that are on top of my head when we think about, you know, when we think about it as a recent development and not like as an inherent survival mechanism, that so there is COVID, and it did isolate us, and our physical engagements have been reduced. Then there is a certain fear of interacting to a certain degree, because you don't know where other people have been and whom they have met. And so these are some of the, plus, you know, like a polarization of societies, and the ability to kind of draw yourself out of disagreements by just, you know, focusing on your social media feed that is completely through the algorithm, like custom designed for you, and to kind of confirm your beliefs. I would like to hear some opinions about that, you know, where it stems from. And that's what I wanted to say.
Let's move to Dennis. You're still mute.
Okay. So it's a really good point, Debora, and I was thinking a little bit along the same lines, because I would say the aha moment that Werner had comes from I would say a relatively safe space that you are able to react to your environment and to your surroundings. But the first thing that I went to, strangely enough, is the fact that what if you can't? And then we get to a space where I would say a lot of people live. They do not have the freedom, or they don't dare, or they have a fear to move to a better space, or think that they are able to change the world or move the needle, like you said. I think the operative word there is fear. And because what if what you do, the change you make, really does have an impact? I think really literally people maybe even fear success, because it changes their whole perspective. If they don't believe in the company that they work anymore, it's relatively easy for us the people who are on this call to say, well, just exit your company and move and work somewhere else. But getting to that space is extremely difficult. It means you have to conquer your fear. And this means, I would say, then we get back to the intelligence part, and also I would say the emotional part, that we need to also address that not everybody is in the space that we are in. You know, we are people that are able to navigate change and drive innovation because we've gone through it and we like to do it, but it's a very privileged space to be in. Because I would say, saying to somebody that they need to change, that's maybe the biggest bomb that you can give somebody. In that sense, if you say, where does it come from? I'm fortunate also enough, in that sense, I really must say fortunate, to also be part of a discussion around forced change. And this forced change idea is more of a starting point where some people might react to COVID in a positive way and surf through it and even make some money of it. But other people really get dragged down, and they're not moving forward, and life is going into the wrong direction. And in that sense, being part of a strong community might give people a way out of that. But what about the people who are not naturally part of a community? And that's a whole lot of people. So I can my mind actually on that point just exploded because I think that's it's a cross section or a nexus of the biggest problem that we have is to face the fear of change and finding people that will help you to ask the right questions, which lead to bigger fears and bigger change, which is hugely difficult to go through. But I would say the great thing, tying it back to the initial question of Jens about how to create, I would say, a culture and maybe innovation. A change culture is maybe also best for a community. I noted down some really nice things that you can go through that will help you to be able to do that. But in that sense, we have to do it together, and of course, it's all about people in that sense. So maybe that's an interesting start point to move back to that point.
Oh, no, we switched you already. So I want to bring us home. So we go on with Ulrike, then Joshua, Mercedes, and then we do the final round. Let's start with Ulrike. Not the final round yet.
No, but I'm quite inspired by what has been said the last minutes. And one was triggered by the communities we select, as Werner said, because it gives the power and the trust in yourself that you can influence. Also, coming back a little what Dennis just said, you can love it, you can leave it, and you can change it. And sometimes if you're not in the fortunate situation to exit your company, you can still decide to be okay with the situation, to love it. And bringing that back to what you just said, Debora, is it something I actively choose, or is it a social media feed, which is very bad, that is chosen for me, giving me very targeted and very narrow information? So I still think that in the end, we need to find that inner trust in us and that we actually can have impact. Something that then came up by listening to all of you was, I don't know if someone of you have seen the little YouTube video where it is about creating a movement. And you have a guy that is dancing, on a green grass somewhere in a park and looks very stupid. But then he finds his first follower. And then he finds his second follower, and then somewhere you have the tipping point where all of the people in the park are dancing like crazy. And I think there is so much hope in this little video, because in the end, it shows us if we learn to stand up for our beliefs, and if we dare to actually put in the forefront what we believe in, we will find followers, we will find people. Think about this little Greta Thunberg, she started with the belief that she says, we can't go on like that, we need to tackle climate change. And then all over the world, she found people standing up and fighting with the same voice. So even if you are a single person, you can have impact. And that is something very hopeful for me now, where I'm really engaged out of our conversation.
Love that. Thank you, Ulrike. Let's move on to Joshua and then finishing with Mercedes.
It's a great points that you raised, Ulrike, and I'm not going to derail the conversation too much here, but I just wanted to leave something slightly different to what everything that's been discussed so far. And it does tie back to what you just mentioned about how small changes can sometimes create a bigger whole, which then can create a movement inside of that space. And how I'll bring it into what I wanted to share is around the combination between the physical and the digital. And so some people on the call and those listening may be familiar with the pseudo economy. And I think that's something inside of this space is that we need to start thinking about when we start thinking about people, who are we talking about when we're talking about people? Because us sitting on the call, the 7 of us can have very different personalities inside of different economies. And if you think about that interaction, and to the point that, Werner, that you raised around the communities that we select, one, we've got the ability now to unlock that different community element with a pseudo economy and different interaction platforms. But we've also got an element that we need to stay true to ourselves, which links back to the questions that we discussed earlier around value and the belonging side of the community. So that's just a little something that was running around in my head that I wanted to share. And yeah, I'm not going to derail the conversation completely and go down that rabbit hole.
Thanks, Joshua. Mercedes.
Well, a lot of very clever things and insightful things have been said, so I will not repeat them, but I will add another one. We are talking about, courage, and we all here are people with strong will and a lot of drive. But if people doesn't have it in them, find a companion of travels, ask for help, go with someone, get someone that will anchor you forward. You don't need to be alone. You don't need to find all the strengths in you. You can just trust people around you from your community, your close, a mentor, and do the travel with someone. Because when you travel with someone, you get their energy, their power, and get inspired. So you don't need to do everything alone. So just encourage others as well to find companion of travels and to start the change that you want to see in your life. It's okay to ask for help.
That's a great finishing part. And I love that, because I love the part in, like, you are all my companion of traveling in the moment, and have been over the last half year, which is awesome. And thank you for that. So I would like to finish up with a quick round again. So having 2 points for every one of you and super rapid fire. So what did you learn today? And what is your call to action for everyone watching or listening? And we start off again with Ulrike.
So, wow, it's me again. So the golden sentence that stuck with me today came from Mercedes, which was about don't judge and stay curious. And actually, this is something I will note for myself, and I also wish the listeners to take with them. Let us stay more curious and also truly listen to what others have to say, to understand better and to truly allow and live more diversity of thought.
Thank you. Werner.
I have to throw it back to Mercedes and say thank you again, because for me, the big thing is the whole idea around community. So thank you for that. I think it's important to consider the current community you're in and maybe the communities that you can join. And my challenge is once again, Mercedes, thank you. I love this whole idea of the companion. It's like, yeah, find your people, like go on a journey. And I think the other thing is also important is that it's good to find people that are willing to go on a journey, because this is a journey, like change is a journey. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Werner. Debora.
Yeah, so I really agree with Werner on saying that this whole idea of belonging and finding your community, I think it's really inspiring. Thank you, Mercedes, for that. I think it's ultimately true. And I think as a takeaway and a call to action for everyone, test things out, like test out what community you might belong to and what may work for you. And just don't be shy to give yourself the freedom to test and see what works for you.
Thank you. Dennis.
So I will try to keep it really short because I think that the discussion that we had today can only the point that I'm at in my head right now can only be done by getting people around yourself that are different from yourself. And in that sense, I never thought that I'd reach the point that I'm at right now when we talk about people. So thank you all for taking this to all different kinds of spaces. from different generations to wisdom to intelligence. Thank you for that. And I think the call to action is to find other people to counter and to balance with, to see if you can open your mind towards some form of action. And I will try to do that the rest of the day.
Thanks, Dennis. Mercedes.
Well, it's going to be difficult to only choose one because a lot of very good things have been said. But if I keep one on my heart, I really like the Werner point that choose your community where you want to do an impact. I think that's very powerful. Sometimes we just go with the flow, but make a conscious decision where you want to make an impact and where do you belong. That's a very good one. And the other is I will give it to Dennis because I believe it was you that said it. We need to trust technology. Technology is made by humans. Stop all this nonsense of being afraid of robots and all that kind of stuff. It's made by humans with the intention to help humans. Trust technology. We really need it. We never need it so much like now. So that will be my call to action.
Thanks, Mercedes. And final one, Joshua.
Well, it's always an interesting one whether you want to go first or last. So I'll try and top everyone that's gone before me. But what I'm sort of tied all together, and what I keep coming back to is this word ecosystem that was mentioned right at the beginning of the conversation. And so there are three things that fit inside of that for me. So the first is belonging, the second is intersection, and the third is innovation. And why I've chosen those three words, and those are sort of the main key takeouts that I'll take from today's conversation, is because they all contribute towards making a successful and a thriving and diverse ecosystem. And if you look at the concepts and the discussion points that we've tied on inside of this call, they all need a space to come together inside of. And I think that links very well to right back at the beginning where Dennis challenged us, is it all about people? And I think that we can all say that people form a part of the ecosystem and maybe a central part, but the intersection and the ability to enable diversity through all of these different points inside of the ecosystem is something that is critical to creating a thriving community. And then from a takeout, and what I'd encourage people to do is around asking the question is, what can you do for someone else? And I think that links back to some of the points that we've touched on around selfishness and building a broader community. Is I think that sometimes inside of this world, when we're physically apart, is that it's very easy to think about ourselves and become very self-centered. But I think if we ask that question, what can you do for someone else? You'll be amazed by how giving can unlock your own joy, but also so much more for the people around the world.
Great final. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being on the Breakfast Club. It was an interesting experience having so many people in one podcast setting. And I truly believe it was a successful one. So we didn't trip over each other's words, and everyone stayed to the rules which the Germans set up in the beginning. So it's thank you very much for that. And yeah, for the listeners, if you're interested in engaging with one of the participants from this Breakfast Club, the links to everyone is in the show notes, so you can engage with every one of us. And please comment wherever you see this, wherever you hear this. It means a lot to me, and as well brings fruitful thoughts to us again. And I hope we can do something like this again and see each other in person, maybe do a physical one. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time, and looking forward to meet you in different spaces in the world. Thanks for listening to today's episode. You will find the links and resources in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribing to the show on any of the podcasting platforms and give me a review. This will help me to reach more innovators around the world and bring some of you into the show. If you have any questions to the guest or want to engage with me, feel free to reach out to me on my public WhatsApp at +49 151 7033 1176. I will repeat, +49 151 7033 1176. It's all WhatsApp, texting only. Or follow me on social media and contact me there. And finally, if you look for someone educating you or your team on innovation culture coaching, have a look at heitlandinnovation.com. Thanks, and see you in the next episode.